So, real quick, again, these are 15 millimeter rails. What they do is they come together to create what's called a cage. And I think this is a 7-inch cage. They're measured by the inside of the brackets. And so there's, I think, a 7, a 9, and an 11. Now the 7 is just used for the DSLRs, you know, the small recording unit that's over there that's cutting off my head right now. So they come together pretty easy. It's pretty self-explanatory. You tighten that guy, slide the rails through, and then you tighten it back down. And what we're going to do, I'm going to mount the back one. It should go this way, and then I'll let you do that for the front one. So the reason that they're long is because you have things that mount to the front. For instance, we're going to be putting on a matte box, right? As well as flags that sort of block out the light, and you can kind of train those on various angles of light coming into the camera. We're also going to be putting on a focus wheel, which I'll find it in a second. Should be with my gear. Maybe it's in my little closet there. But in any case, you want a little bit of space in the back because you might actually mount other stuff, and I'll show you what else you can mount. We're going to actually make this a shoulder mount, so I'll show you what we're going to mount back there. But the key is to have both of them in, whatever distance you have between here, this needs to be the same. Yeah. You don't want to be bumping into stuff, and you want to also have the access to the same area of the rail in the front that you need on both of them. All right? So this is how you tell the bottom from the top, because otherwise how would you, right? Yeah. All right, so when you unscrew this guy, and I think this one has to come all the way out. See if I can find, yep, there it is. Now be careful because there's a little washer on there. Okay. So just turn it upside down when you're about to fully unbolt it, and then this guy, which is your grip, mounts here. All right, so that is actually going to need to be further up because this goes in front, right? So I'm going to move these up here, and then the other bracket is going to go here. See what I mean? Yeah. Because it needs to go like that. Technically speaking, I could mount it like this. You know what I mean? The front of the camera is going to be there, so to hold it, you can do that. And you know what? Why don't I just do that? That's going to be okay. It's not going to get in the way of anything. Actually, nah, I'll do it right. In the back, you've got, there's a hot and or cold shoe on the top of the camera. And sometimes stuff gets mounted to that. There's not a whole lot of room in a 7-inch cage to do a lot of stuff like that, but you know, you might want to. So leaving yourself the option is important. And doing it right is also important. So, have you ever put one of these together before? Mm-mm. All right. The tricky part on the top when you're having to put this on your grip is also you might want to have 2 rails on the top as well. So if you tighten it all the way down and realize that you've forgotten them, that's kind of like a little bit annoying. Yeah. So why don't you hold the 2 rails for me, and I'll tighten that. That's about right. Does that look good?
I think so.
All right. I have big sausage fingers too, so it's hard to. So, yeah, that's good. So then we're going to loosen this, and since this is going to be the front, we're going to just give ourselves a little bit of space in the front to mount the matte box and the focus puller and all that stuff. And essentially you can just line those all up. Yeah. Which is a lot easier than trying to figure out all that space work ahead of time. So that looks about right. All right. And the bottom one works the same way. And these are, if you'll notice, pick that one up. It's pretty light. Mm-hmm. This one is the same size and everything, but it's And it's still light, but it's not as light.
Yeah, this one's like really.
Yeah, and the reason is because this one is carbon fiber, and that one is aluminum. It might even be like, I'm pretty sure it's aluminum, but it might be like a very light steel.
Yes.
They don't have to be really, really strong because you're not really putting a whole lot of pressure in one direction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's every time you tighten it, it squeezes it on all sides. So, you know, I mean, technically, when you're squeezing from all sides of the circumference of a circle, all you're doing is making it stronger.
Yeah.
So, but it's good to have the aluminum also, is because they're never going to rust. You know, they don't. If they chip, they tend to fray, but they're hard to chip.
Yeah.
There's also little end pieces that I have, and because they've been in cold and hot so much, they've sort of expanded and contracted and fallen off, essentially. So why don't you take these and mount that right there and leave about that much space between the back. Yeah. And I'll actually adjust those. So you're going to need to loosen each of those and slide it on there. You work on that, and I will work on the shoulder part. This is actually pretty neat. You can mount this a couple different ways, and it actually is quite stable. You can kind of throw it over your shoulder like this and push against the harness itself, or you can just kind of let it sit on your shoulder like this, and it'll more or less be stabilized.
For these?
Less what?
Less or farther?
Oh, the large distance really doesn't matter. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be like pinpoint accurate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This one is really the only one that truly matters. These guys, as long as they're pretty much level from here to here, the same as here to here,
then they're good.
Then they're good.
Okay.
But these guys are the ones that are important. These go on the bottom.
How? Is there a difference between?
Doing what?
This is all the same, right? Each of these?
Same what? What do you mean?
Like, these are all the same, right?
The
They're all the same size.
The brackets?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's all 15 millimeters. Each of the, they're rails, and they're all 15 millimeters. They're the bigger ones, like the pro ones, like the Panavision cameras that are like, 60-pound cameras when you've got all your, monitors mounted and cables and batteries and everything like that, all the lights set up. Those guys they get pretty heavy. So this is how it's typically set. Now, when the camera is mounted, it's not going to do this. You see how it's kind of sitting sideways there? When the camera's mounted, it'll pull more directly to the bottom there. And so, mounting this guy, you can do this two different ways. You can mount it to a brace system on the bottom, which would be kind of like right here. So when you hold the camera, the shoulder rig, this mounts to this bar, so you can do this guy right here. Or you can manipulate this guy and use a separate ring system here, which then just ties down. There's all kinds of neat little things you can do with these. It's kind of like Lincoln Logs for the film industry. Now the key is to get it situated to you personally. You know what I mean? It's going to mount on your shoulders much differently than it would mine. And I prefer to look into the viewfinder a different way than you might, you know what I mean? So giving it that this is kind of like acts as a spacer or a riser. So you can do it this way. You can have it basically like this. And I'll go ahead and tighten it down like that. So you can see it gets pretty big pretty quick.
Yeah.
and starts requiring of a certain amount of strength. And it's light, it's as light as it can get, but it, you know, once you put a camera on there and like all this other stuff, it starts adding up quick. All right, so this needs to be adjusted actually. There is a bracket that mounts on here that turns it from sort of, that right now is kind of sideways. This normally mounts like that, and the grips come down, and this meets up with the rails right here. Right? So I'm gonna need my little Allen wrench. I think that's the right one. Keeping all these little proprietary tools over the years has been quite difficult.
Is this all your equipment?
Yep. It's all mine. I've got a couple of the stands. So that stand, so these three right here are not mine. The two tripods back there are mine. This tripod's mine, and the small stand behind it is mine. But the stuff mounted on them is all mine except for this one big light right here, and that's the one that we have in the gear locker.
What is this?
That is a monitor. It mounts, okay, so a good example of why you would need one is this jib arm here, this crane jib. If the camera is way up high, you don't really know what it's seeing.
Yeah.
So what the benefit of that does is you can mount that right to the side of the jib arm.
Oh wow.
And you can see
Yeah.
precisely what's being recorded. That looks about right. So then your rails go through here, which we messed up again. I'll say I messed up again because I need to be the one to notice that first. But so how this works is, so this is the front. So we're going to loosen these guys again. Here, do me a favor and hold that so I don't fumble, continue fumbling, I should say. And actually come over here so I've got access to this stuff. All right. I'm going to loosen these, and now hold it from here. We're going to pull these guys this way. All right, keep holding them. All right, and then pass through here. Right, wrong way, right? There we go. All right, and then we push that through. Keep pushing. I can't see what's going on over there. Can you see that?
Up. It's there.
Okay. All right, so bring that back to, say, there and there. I'm going to tie that down, but then I need to make sure that this has, there he is.
Hello.
My car was super stuck.
Oh yeah? What is going on? Why are you stuck? I don't get it. All right. So now what you're going to look at is where you want your camera to sit. Okay, so we've got this camera that's recording, we've got that camera that's mounted, we've got that as a DSLR that's mounted, each of which have different sizes. All right? Willkommen.
Trying to pick this up.
We're just putting the rail system together for a shoulder rig. Nothing terribly technical.
Okay.
So we're just talking about how to do that. So now the DSLR, you'll want to bring this back as far as possible because most of the space on that camera is the lens. I mean,
Yeah.
obvious. This camera, you can put it pretty much anywhere you want. You put it probably, say, in the middle. Now, keep in mind, though, that when we mount the matte box is going to come up to, I mean, it's adjustable front to back, but the front of the camera needs to, you need to have enough space coordinated between this position, and the rails themselves, right, to like make it all work. All right, so just, I'm not saying there's any right way or wrong way right now. Just keep that in mind when you're putting this guy together. So for right now, we'll just say that we'll mount the DSLR. So I'll bring this back to about here. And that's actually not a bad idea to grab the DSLR. Tony, you mind grabbing that tripod and bringing it back here for me, please? You know how to do that, don't you?
Yeah.
Carrying it in front like that. Have you had film with Sheridan or?
Nope.
No?
I took a photojournalism class with Bill Kirkendall
Oh, right on.
a couple years ago, 2 years ago.
Let's see. All right. So now it's getting bigger and bigger, and even heavier. All right. So.
Just a screw on.
Oh no. We'll,
Okay.
yeah, just set it there.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't want to fudge with it too much.
All right. So those are good. That's good. All right, it's nice and solid. So all we've done so far is we put this section is called the cage. All right, and this is the cage. This is the shoulder mount or the shoulder pad. You can mount the shoulder pad several ways. You can put it where it's positioned now and just kind of like push it against you. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, what you're going to need in these cases is like a strap as well, like a shoulder strap coming from, say, the camera or this part of the rail, this rail here on the bottom. And that'll keep it on you, so where if you bump into something and you need to like fall and grab yourself, it's not going to like fall and hit the deck.
Okay.
And destroy all of everything, including your career. So, all right. So the way that this mounts, I guess I'll go ahead and talk about this too. All right. So underneath all your cameras is going to be a plate. Some people call it a base plate. Some people call it a foot plate. It's just that plate right there. All right. It tightens and loosens on the underside of it. Anybody got a key or a penny? And there's this key here, which is actually what I'm supposed to be using for all of this stuff. So I'll go ahead and use this, since it's the right thing to do. Generally, whenever you buy a tripod with a head, it comes with a plate and a key. If it's worth anything, it'll come with the right stuff that you need to manipulate it. So, as soon as you loosen that, it pops off. All right. And don't need that anymore. So if it'll mount in here, it's going to mount right to this little screw here. And I'm going to take this guy off. Anytime you're mounting a camera, first of all, you don't want these straps on because they get caught on stuff or just all kinds of stuff. So just take those off. If you have to unscrew them or whatever you have to do to get those, whatever it takes, that's what you need to do. Whenever you're mounting something, there it is. You put the lens cap on, because if you grab the lens cap, you're going to put little fingerprints on there. And God forbid you have a ring on, you might scratch it, you know what I mean? It's just a good idea to remember to have that lens cap on there whenever you're unmounting or mounting anything like that. All right. All right, now this is a little bit difficult. It's actually a good idea in some cases to have, I just assembled all of this stuff from scratch. So it's, just it all came out of one bag and now it's together. But generally speaking, it's a good idea to have some of it put together. So A, it doesn't take that long, and B, you can have the camera mounted on this segment and then put this segment on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a little bit safer because it's all about protecting the camera. From the word go, everything that you do as far as safety, I mean beyond protecting yourself of course, but the next thing in line is the camera. All right, so a good way to ensure that you've got this straightforward is to look down the rails. Right, and if that matches up with the same angle as the lens, which it kind of doesn't right now, it's pointing a little bit that way, if you can tell.
Yeah.
But a second way to do that is to, you also always want to have one hand on it. If it's resting against something or whatever, you always want to have one hand on it. You can also bring this back, bring your mat box back. You can see if it matches up when you drive it back. If it doesn't, loosen it up on the bottom with my fat fingers and bring it sideways. When it locks down, it's surprisingly taut. Like it's surprisingly snug in there. So, all right, another thing about your cameras. This camera, the GoPros, the biggest difference between the lenses is that this one goes up. All right, so now we're going to start jamming it against the mat box if we do that. So you need to extend the lens fully as far as it'll go out, which appears to be right there, without the lens cap. And now you can take the lens cap off because you're not in danger of hitting it. Draw this guy back and tighten it down just a little bit off. So where there's maybe a millimeter or two space between the front of the lens and the mat box. And you hear that little crack?
Yeah.
You don't have to tighten these things crazy hard. All you have to do is get it to where they're not moving. Because I just cracked that plastic in there. It's not that good a quality. And there are better ones, but this is what I could afford on my little indie budget when I was traveling. So there you go. You've got your basic shoulder mount tripod, or your basic shoulder mount cage, and that little guy right here bouncing around in there. You will hear that. So a good thing to do is to just take those all the way off. I'm not going to for today's purposes because it'll just take time that's unnecessary. But now that we've got these, we can actually set this guy down. You're going to want to do that on a secure place with nothing underneath it. These rubberized little guys here will keep it from sliding. It'll also keep it kind of stationary and saddled. So, flags. All right, these are flags. They're also called barn doors. They call these the exact same things as they call on the light systems over there, and we'll talk about the large LED lights. There are also lights known as like Hinoflows that have the big long bay. You can mount 3 like 36-inch. They look a lot like the fluorescent bulbs, the long white ones, only they have a different temperature of light, and they can even go in match up with different tones like cyan, magenta, et cetera, all that stuff. Now, what is this stuff? I've got sticky crap all over these flags. Good idea to have a rag around. I use my socks. Socks are awesome because you can put stuff in them. You know what I mean? Yeah. I keep my wireless labs mics in my socks, in my little pair of socks here. I mean, they're all torn up and crappy anyway, so I'm not really worried about it. But you fold them over and it has actually decent cushion in there. Decent rag. Yeah, and a rag. So there's the idea of why it's called a flag, because it does this. Some cameramen, some cinematographers and camera operators only like having one flag. In what we're doing right now, look at the light. Where's the light coming from? We only need one, right? If we needed a second one, technically we would need one on the bottom because the ground, as you can see, is this light, sort of very light pewter, almost like what would you call that? Like an eggshell or something. Probably a little bit darker than eggshell, mixed with like a gray. Yeah. So you may or may not need the side ones, but I'm gonna go ahead and mount them because I'm talking about it and I want to take up less space on my table. The more heavy duty ones are gonna mount a little bit tighter than this, but I've never really needed something. The heavier duty, the literally heavier they are. So, I knew very well that I was going to be packing this stuff up mountains. You know what I mean? Thought ahead. Yeah, that was a good, and I've never regretted that decision. So, that's it. That's like raw dog. That's basically all you need. Now there are all kinds of other stuff that we can put on this guy, and we will. Let's talk about this guy right here. This is a monitor, your standard monitor. Now I've mounted a hood on top of this monitor because it's not very light in here right now, but when you're outside and the sun is coming down, have you ever tried to like take a picture with your phone and you can't see anything because it's so bright outside? This helps a little bit. It doesn't help everything, and you know, in most cases it will do very little, but it's good to have in the event of, you know, that you actually have the option of getting into the shade in some way. You know, it really will. If you bring it over to the shade, this thing does the rest of the job. You know, on a professional shoot, if you're outside of a studio, I mean, on a professional shoot, they actually build a tent around the director and or the cinematographers on staff, and that is specifically just to monitor, and it's going to be a hell of a lot bigger, more expensive, and prettier than this one, but it's going to go in what they call the director's tent. You know, it's usually right on set. It's like, you know, let's say this table represents the tent. This would be the tent. 20 to 30 feet away be the actors doing their thing. You're on scene. You're not just like in your trailer. And part of the reason, it's changed a lot with Wi-Fi, but part of the reason is, you know, this is an HDMI cable. The HDMI, just like any other signal, will deplete over the longer of the distance that you have the cables. So it needs to be somewhere near the cameras. It needs to have a live feed. You need to see what's going on all the time. The director has his bullhorn and he says action. The first thing he does is he turns and looks at this monitor. And that's the only thing he looks at. The things that he or she is looking for is, you know, how is this going to look on the screen? And we can actually pop into, where's my little blue box? We can pop into, actually let me do this. The visuals that we're going to get out of here. Oh crap, I bet I don't even have a battery in there. I wonder if I can access that. Hold that for me for a sec. Oh yes, my battery cage is free. Where are my batteries? All right, you can actually just put that on the table if you don't mind. Yep. What you don't want to do, the reason I handed that to you is because you don't want to just let that drop. Right. The tip of HDMIs and XLR cables, over time they look strong, but over time they will damage. So anyway, let's come and look at my little portable trailer here. Once I take my battery out of the camera, it goes right to the charger. As soon as I pick it up off the charger, I walk it right over there to that box and I put it in the battery box. And I also, if you'll notice, I have some gaffer's tape stuck onto the battery here. And on that I have written D800 and then 1:3. So D800 is obviously the body of the camera that it goes to, and 1:3 is number 1 of 3. All right, getting into patterns is very important in the video world, because one of the things you're going to do is find that you're going to be confused by, oh man, is that battery charged? I don't know if it's charged. I don't know which one did I use last or whatever. But if you always go in order, you'll always know that 2 follows 3, right? And then when you're done with 2, 3 goes in the camera, 2 goes on the charger, right? So if you have a minimum of 3, you've always got 2, 1 backup and 1 solid, 1 charging, right? Yeah. And trust me, I didn't just know that. I had to learn that one the hard way. Lost many an opportunity for filming and footage. All right, so cards. That's your other important thing that you're going to need to number, label, and be like a Nazi about it. All right. That's number 1 of 4. And at one point I actually started labeling my cases. You know, I put an E on it. So what I can do is, if this is the front of the card and this is facing E, that means this one does not need to be formatted. It's empty, E for empty. If I turn it back and the number faces the E, that means it's full. That means I don't want to initialize it. I don't want to format it and get rid of everything. I need to back that up. Right? That's another little way of keeping track of the footage that you have created and that you don't write right over it. I wonder if that's going to fit in there like that. Oh, I got lucky. Oh, cool. Look at that. All right. So, fully mounted, ready to go. So if I turn this guy on, I'm going to switch it to live view. All right, you guys see what I'm looking at right there? Yeah. So now it's right there in front of me, nice and easy to see. And it's actually pretty smooth. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect this guy to the monitor, and then we'll see what that looks like. So this HDMI cable in here is a mini HDMI. So you're going to need an adapter, or one that goes from basically from big to small. And I've got a cable that does just that. All right. You also want to stock up on rechargeable batteries. And the reason is because so right now my mic is hooked up to my wireless lav transceiver, and then the receiver is mounted there. And if I use them for, say, 2 hours, and I'm worried about it, like after the shoot, I'm gonna be kind of like second guessing that set of batteries' ability to go back into another camera. It's not that they're completely depleted, it's just that I don't want to be halfway through the recording and they die. So rechargeable batteries save you from having to waste copious dollars on batteries. And trust me when I say that one of the hugest wastes in studio budgets is batteries. They just waste them, and they have no choice but to waste them. All right, so I'm going to roll this guy around and get the
turns.
Yeah, I'll talk about that in a second. That's a pretty neat feature that they figured out. All right, so this one has a full-size HDMI, and we won't be able to mount it here, but you'll get the gist. We'll be able to see the movement. I'll show you what the display is supposed to look like, what the director is going to be looking at. Just pretend I've got it here. All right, but real quickly before I get into that, I also want to do this. So the other way to mount it, the way I actually prefer, is like this. Now you gotta tighten that down quite snug or else it doesn't work. Now, the cool thing about doing it like this is that it pushes against your shoulder, and really all you have to do, you don't even have to grab the thing. You should, but you don't have to, because it should just like push right against you. When it pushes right back, then you're not like straining to hold it somewhere. You're not doing this, by the way, you're turning with your hips. Right, your shoulders and everything on your torso from your hips up, that's what turns when you walk around and manipulate this thing. All right. So if I'm watching you and you're the interviewer and she's the interviewee, all I'm going to do is come in and do this. And when it comes back time for you to do your talking, I'm going to make sure you're in frame. And when both of you guys are talking, I'm just going to step back nice like a glide, basically, heel to toe. All right, heel to toe and then toe to heel, just like you're dancing in an operetta or something. Okay. But nice and smooth, turning from the hips. All right. All right, that's that. So let's connect this guy here. And I'm gonna go ahead and utilize, I need something heavy. Oh, maybe I just, all right. You don't want to ever balance anything. If you lean it forward, you don't want to lean it on the flags. All right, you want to pull those flags back and do that. So plug that guy into that guy. Let me get that end, please. Thank you. Is that okay?
Yep.
All right, so I was sorry, see this little loop-de-loop? What you don't want to do is just like yank it like that. Instead, take it from the area that doesn't have that, bring that side up, and it'll naturally flesh itself out. It'll just kind of become nice and smooth, all right? You don't want to, the more you crimp that, it's not going to break it like right away, but the more you crimp that and bend it and all that stuff, it's copper wire, it's metal. It'll bend enough, it'll just start fraying in there. So you just want to maintain that the mental note, you know, keep that in the back of your head that you will deteriorate that line if you do that. So always being very careful with this equipment. It's the equipment that sustains you, right? You take care of it, it will undoubtedly take care of you. All right? Being nice and gentle with it all the time. All right, this one's got a separate power button in the back. All right. All right, no input signal because I haven't made one yet. All right, there we go. So I don't know what my screen looks like over here, but I'm going to check something real quick. And you see that now it's unbalanced because I put the wire on it. That's how balanced it is. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. All right, so make sure I'm on the screen here. All right, good. All right, so is that guy on screen? It is. You guys can step in and get a little closer to it. I would prefer that you do that so it's all on screen and we're able to see it. All right, let's go ahead and, now that we have that like we want, I'm going to go ahead and take that hood off there. It's also called a visor. Easiest way to balance it, it is still a little bit. And this guy, it's within like millimeters where you move this thing back and it'll balance the guy out. So that's basically balanced. All right, so but I wanted to have this hood on here to show you that, you know, it's one of the pieces of gear, but we'll take that off so that you guys can see it. And sometimes it's just not appropriate to have right now, for instance. So let's look at the data on this guy. All right. The display information on here, we've got the time per card. I'm going to switch it over to A. So the time per card on this guy is, I've got 57 minutes and 57 minutes on 2 cards, so that's about 2 hours. I'm shooting at 1080, 1920 by 1080, and it's 30p. P stands for progressive, I stands for interlaced. Have you guys ever heard those terms before? It's just the way that the signal itself renders on the final. If my intention is to put this on network television, it's going to be different than if I put this on the internet. All right, the signal is just going to be broken down a different way. So interlaced, you've got lines of information as they come from top to the bottom of the screen or YouTube browser or whatever, right? So if they're interlaced, that means that half of them come in from the left and half of them come in from the right, and they lace this way. If it's progressive, i.e. progressive scan, you might have actually seen that on some DVD player from the 90s or something, right? Progressive scan, it's a big sales pitch or whatever, big point of whatever, because progressive, it changed things and made it different. But what that does is it essentially comes down the line and boom, 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 boom. I'm also shooting at 35 megabits per second. If I change that up to 50 megabits per second, it will drop my time to about half. I'll show you. Oh, all right, let's see. And that is called, does anybody know what, it went away. Does anybody know what that's called? Before I get to it?
What you had on the screen before?
Yeah, does anybody know what 35 megabits per second is called? Like what I'm talking about when I say that.
No, I don't think so. Bit rate.
Bit rate. All right, so if I change that up to, so it's 1920 by 1080. If I move it up to 50 megabits per second at 720 or 1080, it comes down to, wait, 40 minutes. So it takes 20 minutes right off the top. You won't get those 20 minutes back. So I don't have any need for 50 megabits per second. That's like a huge render rate. That there's, you know, news broadcasting and things like that, they do that. Have you ever watched a video and like there's a pan, or somebody's just walking sideways with their little phone or whatever, and you get these little teeth marks at the edge of the subject? You ever seen that?
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it basically, those are the little lines, the progressive scan or interlace lines. That's what is, those lines are trying to catch up with the movement on the screen at the time. And so if you have a higher bit rate, that means it forces more information into those lines at the same time it would at a lower bit rate or whatever, you know. So upping that to the maximum is going to be best. Now, I should be shooting at 50 megabits per second. I should be. I just don't. You know, whatever you shoot at, whatever camera you have, you should be using its maximum capabilities. I mean, it makes sense because you can't add that later. But
Should we be shooting video in RAW?
no,
Okay.
that's the exception.
Okay, I was gonna say.
If you're sitting next to Peter Jackson
Sure.
on the set of The Hobbit, for instance, yes, that's a good idea to shoot raw.
Okay.
Because he does stuff with that. He does stuff with that footage that you and I are probably not going to do.
Right.
You know, it takes a team of editors, countless man hours to put together stuff like that from RAW, and that's why. But it's a huge waste of card space otherwise.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay.
Yeah. I've got two 16 gigabyte cards in here, and if I get 40 minutes out of each one, that's, you know, for me on a small budget as an indie guy, that's a lot. That means I have to have like 6 to 10 cards on hand just to make enough footage for like an hour-long presentation of whatever. Mm-hmm. You know, right then if I'm shooting for that day. So, you know, wedding videography and stuff like that, 35 megabits per second at 1080 is fine. And most of the time you won't even need 1080. But let's say I shot at 720. What happened? What are you doing? There we go. So if I move to 1280 by 720, it doesn't change the minutes at all. So I don't lose anything by keeping it right there. Right? And I don't know why. Actually, it should be less, but so I've got a frame rate at 30. I can change that to 60 if I'm doing something like, you know, skiing videos or race car driving or something like that that requires like a lot. But I wonder what that does to the time. It doesn't do anything to the time. So that I again, what does that stand for?
Interlace?
Yep. And P?
Progressive?
Yep. Progressive or progressive scan. All right. So if I want to do something like a special record, I can do like interval recording, frame recording, pre-recording, slow and fast motion. And slow and fast motion, I would get somebody running and like ding 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 ding, right, and try and get some like really dramatic scene out of it or something like that. And this camera will be capable of doing that. So interval record, frame record. Let's see. Oh, it does shoot at 30. It just changes it. It changes it internally, and I don't have to do anything in post-production. Really, I've never used any of those because I am familiar enough with my editing software that I can make a nice slow-mo out of all kinds of the stuff that I do. And I also know to prep my gear before I shoot. I'll know that, okay, I'm definitely going to want, I'm out with these ski bums, they're going to want something in this video that I'm shooting for them that catches that powder blowing up. They might not have said it, but everybody knows the GoPro videos, right? I mean, it all depends on what you can infer what your client needs there. All right. So, and when you format your cards, which is what you do every time you put them back in your camera, you need to format them, and the word that is the industry standard for that is initialize. So you initialize it, and to do that, I mean, I've already done it, but it'll say initializing. There's also some, and I've got an SD card. The SD card actually sits in here and takes still frames from it just does frame grabs as I'm recording. I can have it set to do like every 30 seconds or something. It'll just take a frame grab from the video and save it onto a different medium, and that's what that SD card's for. But this SD stands, do you know what SD stands for?
I don't know what it stands
Is it a
for, but I know what
company?
it is.
Yeah, it is.
It's Sans Disc?
ScanDisk, but yeah,
ScanDisk.
you were on top of it. CF, what does CF stand for? Compact Flash. It's the same thing. It's just a brand. So you know, Compact Flash invented the type of card that is in both here. There's dual card slots for here. So there's every time I put cards in here, I'm putting 2. And this one has 2 card slots as well, but one's an SD and one's a CF.
Weird, I never knew that SD was like a brand.
Yeah.
I always just thought it was like what it
A type.
was.
Yeah. Yep. That's the power of effective branding. You know, because nobody says tissue, they say Kleenex, right?
Yeah.
It's because but what's a Kleenex? It's a company. Everybody knows what Kleenex is though. All right, so I'm gonna get out of here. All right, that's pretty much gonna stay where it's at. Now, as I said a moment ago that there are hot shoes and cold shoes. Do you remember that? Actually, I think I said them when she was here, so sorry. Hot shoe and cold shoe. On this DSLR, on this camera, if you don't mind sneaking in for this one, on this camera, you'll see that there are little connecting.
Oh, you told us this the other day
Yeah.
when we did the camera thing with Chase.
Oh, okay. All right, well, for your benefit, those little connecting pieces right there, when I put on one of my flash guns, all right, so see the little pins there? All right. If I were to slide that on there and lock it in place and then turn it on, it would talk to the camera and the flash gun would talk to each other and have the conversation that we have would sound something like this. I am zooming in, you should zoom in too. And you can actually hear this thing zoom in to, if I go all the way into, I think this is a 24 to 70. Yeah, 24 to 70. This will zoom into about 70 millimeters. Actually, what happens inside the flash is it retracts, because what that does is it focuses that light forward. It focuses on whatever it is that's 70 millimeters out, or far enough out that I zoom all the way in. And if I zoom it out to say 24 mil, it'll push to the front and sort of like it'll expose more of the flash itself toward the front and open up for dispersing that light in a wider path. Right? That's the effectiveness. That's the efficacy of a hot shoe. Now a cold shoe is something different. It simply means that there's no conversation that takes place between whatever's sitting on that shoe and the device for which that item is benefiting the recording in some way. All right, so on this camera right now, I have this light. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this guy off here, which will probably change the weight differential again. I'll have to adjust that. Yep. Super sensitive, huh? All right, put you back in place. All right, so on top of here, on top of here, we've got this guy which has no pins on it at all. It's just a flat piece of plastic. You can mount that anywhere you want, and you don't have to worry about it talking to the device, the camera, the recorder, or whatever. You can take a screw mount item like this and mount something like that, and it's got a little rail system. You slide right down in there, and you can mount that to it. So I can loosen that up a little bit. A little bit more. Come on, guy. So it's a rectangle, it's not a square. So that will mount onto like one of the C-stand booms or another one of the brackets here. There's all kinds of different ways that you can mount these. So it'll mount this guy, and then it'll set on a pole. You can just kind of set it up, or you can, as it was, set it right on top of the camera itself. And it'll have kind of like an immediate sort of light. I used this light. This was my cave. You know, I brought the sun into the cave with this thing. It's actually quite bright. It's like 76 little lights on there. And they don't use any battery whatsoever. You can just use them forever. So, good time to connect the shotgun mic, because the shotgun mic, alright, as I did mention this to you guys the other day, but since you're here, this is a shotgun mic, and I've mounted it on a boom. Alright, this is a boom. This is generally just called a light stand. Some people mistakenly call them C-stands. Actually, we don't have C-stands in this building. And I find it funny that some students are like saying, you know, all you need are a couple C-stands. We brought out the C-stands the other day and did this, that, and the other thing. And I'm thinking, who's telling these students that we have C-stands? We don't. C-stand is actually a system of legs that comes in they slide over, if you will, and popping into place into a flat little thing so you can lay them flat. That's actually what a C-stand is. It sits on the ground at one to see. We don't have any of those. But in any case, we'll just call it a light stand. So the stand, this is called a knuckle, this is called a boom, and on that I have my own little mount. Now this, you can put the light there. This is the same exact bracket that I had sitting right here, okay? It's just the top section of it. Right? It's wide, so you can put like a mic and a light, for instance. And so what I'm going to do is take this guy off here, and because the mic on that camera is way far away, when I put this on there and then mount an XLR cable onto it, it's going to focus the audio that it receives into what is called a cardioid beam. Nerdy word for like small, basically. And it actually, they can actually, when they put like, when they hit it with a sonograph or something, you know, a sonograph bounces back based on like sound. I think sound, or is it movement? Maybe it's sound. We'll say sound.
I think it's sound.
So in any case, yeah, I think it is too, because that's how they find the coordinates and everything there. So in any case, if they hit this beam, it actually makes it kind of like the shape of a heart. Actually, you can see kind of fuzzes up at the top and comes down like this, kind of like a triangle or diamond or whatever you want to call it. So, mounting this to the camera, I'm going to put that right in the cold shoe on top. I'm going to have this guy, but I'm also going to take a piece of either tape or string or Velcro, whatever I have available to me at the time. I've got Velcro here, but I would rather use a little white string that I brought precisely for this purpose. But I can't find it. It's so organized. It's perfect workshop. All right, well, I'll use the Velcro. Probably good number or something else. But you mount this guy like so. When you mount it, you're going to slide it into place, and then there's a clamp that sort of screws down. And universally, they all do this. The lights, the mics, all kinds of stuff. Now, this camera actually was designed to also have a bracket that mounts right here on the side. And it's specifically for a mic, but I don't like it because you can actually still hear stuff in it. Now, what I'm doing now is I'm wrapping the cord itself around something, and then I'm going to Velcro that down so that if this ever gets yanked on something, it's not going to pull the mic off, it's not going to damage the camera, it's not going to do any of that stuff. All right, I've got the mic on here. So what I'm going to do that is, this camera, as you can see, has 2 inputs for XLR. That means it's got 2 channels, and I plugged it into channel number 2. So I'm going to come over on this side in the audio panel. I'm going to for auto, I'm going to go with mic, and you have to actually turn it on. Audio external. I bet my battery's dead in there. Great. All right. So I'm gonna pull this guy off and see if I've got a quite a bit. I think it's about right. All right. So these longer mics like this are, they have, if you unscrew this little sheath here, right, normally they have a battery. It doesn't even have a battery in it. It's not going to work that way. All right, so my batteries should be.
You can put them in a bag.
Yeah, put them in a bag. Little battery bag. You'll begin to love bags if you stay in video at all. They save your life. I've actually emptied everything that I could just so I could have this conversation, but really normally I just, if you're on a set or you're on location, you're going to be pulling stuff out of the bag. This is like a luxury, having a table, you know what I mean? So I'm able to do that because I've got a table accessible to me. So. All right, so let's see if this guy works now. He's got a battery in it. And there's two settings on mics like this. There's either phantom or there's regular battery. Now phantom pulls power from the unit itself. And if my batteries are dead, that's what I do. That's what I'll do. I'll just pull power right from the camera itself. And I might end up doing that because I am pretty sure that all my other batteries are being used in other things. So. All right, so I know that my camera is working because if you guys can sneak over here for a second. All right, you see this scale here? Mm-hmm. Every time my voice says something beautiful and marvelous, it comes all the way up over to this way. Now, you'll note that there are a series of numbers. This is called your decibel level. And decibel is simply the level of volume, right? Not the tone or the richness or manliness, as the case may be, but the level. So you'll have 40, 30, 20, 10, etc. I don't know why they decided to do this, but it basically goes up to 0. I know, right? Makes no sense. Just remember that what you want is between 10 and the end. That's where you want. And it's not going to do that every single time because as I'm talking, my voice goes up and down. When I stop talking, instantly that bar drops down again. You won't see or hear anything on there. And so what I'm meaning when I say that is you want the average, right, of the peaks to be in between 10 and whatever the end of that bar is. All right. So now if we look at the two bars, the channel 1 / channel 2, if you can see that. Channel 1, both of them are picking up equally, but if I do this, right, channel 1 is picking up that the noise is happening, but not to the level that channel 2 is. Right? And if I go back to where I was standing a moment ago, and so I go back to where I was a moment ago and point that mic right at my head. It'll. I'll see if I can't go over there and have you guys stay here. You'll notice that channel 1 goes down, but channel 2 is nice and solid right on my voice. La 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 la. See that? And obviously I need to adjust it again. But that's what it does, is it focuses that the area of sound in a conical way, like a shotgun. It's not only like a shotgun in that it hits a certain area in sort of a speckled way, like the shot from like the pellets of a shell, like would come out of the end of a barrel, but also because it actually looks like a barrel. It's shaped, linearly like that. You'll also notice that it's got a cover on it. I just call that a wind guard. That's pretty self-explanatory. This was called a dead cat. And for some strange reason, these things with all these little fibers work much better than the polypropylene covers there. Don't know why. They call them dead cats because clearly they look like a dead animal. This one looks like a dead hamster. But this is what the inside of that one looks like. It's got little openings on the sides, and it's got that focal. Now this one is a cardioid, where that one, the shotgun mic, is what would be considered a super cardioid. So the pattern that this would make on a wall if I shot it would be, something like this, like a bear hug size. The pattern that would make on a wall is something like football size. All right, that one's for way out. You can actually take a, what would it be called? Like a large convex bowl, point that mic into it and turn it around and point at stuff and hear people's conversations like really far away. In fact, that's what detectives use to spy on people from like the second story of a building. Just focuses that sound. So, this is also a cold shoe, right? And you can see that screws in there down to lock down onto whatever device you've mounted it to. You can, with that setup right there, what you would do, this mic, the mic that's inside this canister, or this Nikon, it's the recording quality is very good, but the mic itself, they just don't have the room to make a mic that has that kind of quality on it inside this body and still say, hey, it's compact. You wouldn't be able to do that.
Right.
So that is the benefit of slapping a big mic on there and doing this with it. So if you guys do pick up this camera and walk around the band as they're playing, that's what you'll do. Now, we won't necessarily be recording their audio, but documentary style stuff, yeah, definitely. If you're, I wanted Anish and Chase and Tig here for that conversation, but they would definitely be wanting to get that better mic quality, that powered mic quality out of their shots. So, I've said a lot. You guys have any questions?
Not jumping out.
Yeah,
I don't think so.
that just means I'm doing a phenomenal job.
Clearly.
I'm sure that's what that is. All right, so let's actually pause for a little bit.